Robert Chen had been predicting the weather for 37 years, and he'd never been wrong, not once. This wasn't the boast of an arrogant man, it was simply true. While other meteorologists hedged their bets with percentages and probabilities, Robert gave absolutes. Rain at 3:42 p.m. Snow beginning at dawn, ending at 10:17 a.m. Tornado touching down at the corner of 5th and Main at 6:33 p.m., and he was always right, to the minute. The network had built an entire evening news program around him. Chun's certainty, they called it, and people across 3 states planned their lives by his forecasts. Farmers planted by his predictions, wedding planners booked outdoor venues based on his word. The city's emergency services trusted him more than their own radar systems. No one knew how he did it. Robert had degrees in meteorology and atmospheric science, but his colleagues knew those didn't explain his accuracy. They'd tried to replicate his methods, analyzed his data, studied his patterns. Nothing worked. Robert's gift, if that's what it was, remained uniquely his own. Until the morning he woke up and couldn't see tomorrow's weather. He stood at his kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hands, staring at the October sky. Usually, the knowledge came to him effortlessly, like remembering something that had already happened. He would look at the clouds and simply know what they would do, when they would do it, exactly how it would unfold. But today, there was only silence. The future had closed its door. Robert was 63 years old. He'd been ready to work another decade, maybe more. The gift had never faltered, never weakened. Why now? He called in sick to the station the first time in 15 years. His producer, Jennifer, was immediately concerned. Robert, we have the broadcast tonight. The Halloween forecast is huge. Everyone wants to know if they need to cancel their outdoor plans. I know. I just need a day. Are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine. Robert lied. Just a cold. I'll have the forecast ready by airtime. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. Robert spent the day doing what he'd never needed to do before. Checking models, reading data, analyzing atmospheric pressure and wind patterns like a normal meteorologist. Everything pointed to clear skies for Halloween. A beautiful autumn evening, perfect for trick-or-treating. But Robert didn't trust it. For 37 years, he'd known. Now he was just guessing, like everyone else. At 5 p.m., he drove to the station. In the parking lot, he sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. He could resign, announce his retirement, walk away while his reputation was still intact. No one would question it. 63 was a reasonable age to step back. But 37 years of certainty had made him proud, perhaps too proud. The idea of ending his career on a guess, on mere probability, felt like betrayal. He went inside. The evening broadcast went smoothly enough. Robert delivered his forecast with his usual confidence. Clear skies. Temperature dropping to 52 degrees. Light winds from the northwest. Perfect Halloween weather. He smiled at the camera. He joked with the anchors. No one noticed that his certainty was now just careful acting. The next morning, Robert woke to his phone ringing. Jennifer's voice was tight with panic. Have you seen the news? What happened? The storm, Robert? The Halloween storm? It came out of nowhere. Torrential rain, flash flooding, winds strong enough to knock down trees. 3 towns lost power. A kid was injured by a falling branch. Robert's blood went cold. That's impossible. All the models? I know what the models said. But you're never wrong, Robert. People trusted you. They sent their kids out trick-or-treating because you said it would be clear. After Jennifer hung up, Robert sat in the growing light of his bedroom, understanding finally settling over him like snow. He'd been wrong. For the first time in 37 years, he'd been catastrophically wrong, and people had been hurt because of it. The calls started within an hour. The network wanted a statement. Reporters wanted interviews. People wanted explanations. How had Robert Chen, who'd never been wrong, missed a storm so completely? Robert didn't answer any of them. Instead, he drove north, away from the city, into the mountains where he'd grown up. His father had been a weather observer at a remote station, recording temperatures and precipitation in handwritten logs that were filed away and forgotten. Robert had spent his childhood in those mountains, learning to read the sky before he could read books. That's where it had started, the gift, or the curse, as it now seemed. He was 8 years old the first time he knew. He'd looked at a clear blue sky and said to his father, "Rain at 4:15. His father had laughed, but at exactly 4:15, the rain began. A brief shower, over in 10 minutes, but precisely when Robert had said. After that, it kept happening. Robert would know, and he was never wrong. His father thought it was coincidence at first, then luck, then finally something he couldn't explain but couldn't deny. Maybe you see what the weather was always going to do, his father had said. Maybe that's your way of understanding the world. Robert had built a career on that understanding. He'd become famous for it, wealthy from it, defined by it. And now it was gone. He reached the old weather station just before sunset. It had been abandoned for 20 years, the equipment removed, the building slowly surrendering to the elements. But the observation deck was still there, 50 feet above the trees, offering a view of the valley below. Robert climbed the rusted ladder and stood on the deck, feeling the October wind bite through his jacket. He looked at the sky, searching for the knowledge that had always been there, the certainty that had made him special. Nothing. I'm sorry, he said to the wind, to the sky, to whoever, or whatever, had given him the gift, and now taken it away. Sorry for what? Robert spun around. An old woman stood at the top of the ladder, though he'd heard no one climbing. She wore a coat that seemed woven from mist and carried a walking stick carved from what might have been petrified lightning. Who are you? Robert asked. Someone who's been watching you for a long time. She moved to the railing, looking out over the valley. 37 years, to be exact. You gave me the gift. I gave you the ability to see what was already there. The weather doesn't hide its intentions. Most people just don't know how to listen. She turned to him. But you did. You heard the sky's voice as clearly as your own. Why did you take it away? I didn't. You gave it up. Robert stared at her. That's not true. I woke up yesterday and it was just gone. No. You stopped listening years ago. You stopped paying attention. You had the gift, so you stopped doing the work. The old woman tapped her walking stick against the deck. When was the last time you actually looked at the clouds? Robert? Really looked? The way you did as a child. When did you stop studying, stop learning, stop being curious about the sky? Robert opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. Somewhere along the way, knowing had replaced understanding. He'd stopped watching the weather and started simply announcing what he knew would happen. He'd stopped being a meteorologist and become a prophet. And prophets don't need to study or learn, they just need to speak their truths. I got lazy, he said quietly. You got comfortable. It's what most people do with gifts. They stop appreciating them as gifts and start expecting them as rights. She moved toward the ladder. The question now is what you'll do next. I don't know. I was wrong about Halloween. People were hurt. Yes, and that's a hard thing to carry. But being wrong is part of being human. Robert, you've spent 37 years being something more than human. Maybe it's time to learn what it means to be something less certain but more real. I don't know how to do this without the gift. Then learn. You have degrees. You have experience. You have 37 years of watching the sky. That's more than most meteorologists will ever have. She smiled. The difference is, now you'll have to work for it. You'll make mistakes. You'll be wrong sometimes, but you'll be doing something more valuable than being certain you'll be trying. She descended the ladder and was gone before Robert could ask her name. Robert stood on the deck until the stars came out. He watched the sky the way he'd watched it as a child, with wonder instead of expectation, with curiosity instead of confidence. He didn't know what tomorrow's weather would bring, but he looked at the thin clouds streaming from the west, felt the temperature dropping, noticed the way the wind was shifting. He made a guess, an educated guess, based on observation and knowledge, but still just a guess. Tomorrow would be clear and cold, probably. Maybe 70% chance of sunshine, perhaps. The uncertainty felt terrifying, and somehow, also freeing. The next morning, Robert drove back to the city. He went straight to the station, to Jennifer's office. I need to make a statement, he said. They aired it that evening. Robert sat at his desk, looked into the camera, and told the truth. For 37 years, I have given you forecasts with complete certainty. I was never wrong, and I know many of you planned your lives around that certainty. But 2 nights ago, I failed you. I missed a dangerous storm, and people were hurt because of my mistake. He paused, gathering his courage. I don't know if I can continue to forecast with the accuracy you've come to expect. Something has changed in me, in how I read the weather. I'm going to keep working, keep learning, keep trying to give you the best forecasts I can. But from now on, I'll be doing it the way other meteorologists do, with data, with models, with probability instead of certainty. I'm not retiring. I'm not giving up, but I am admitting that I'm human, and humans make mistakes. If that's not what you need from your weatherman, I understand. But it's all I can honestly offer now. The response was mixed. Some viewers were angry, feeling betrayed. Some appreciated his honesty. The network considered replacing him but decided to wait and see. Robert's forecasts became like everyone else's, mostly accurate, sometimes wrong, always hedged with percentages and disclaimers. His ratings dropped. The Chen certainty brand disappeared. Some days he wondered if he should have retired when he had the chance. But he kept working. He studied weather patterns he'd taken for granted. He consulted with colleagues he'd once surpassed. He learned to check his work, to doubt his instincts, to embrace uncertainty. And slowly, strangely, he began to love the work in a way he never had before. When he was certain, weather had been a performance, now it was a puzzle, a challenge, a conversation with the sky that required attention and humility. Some days he was right, some days he was wrong, but every day he was learning. A year later, Robert stood on his apartment balcony, looking at storm clouds building in the west. He studied their shape, their movement, the way the light caught their edges. He consulted 3 different weather models, checked the radar, analyzed the atmospheric pressure. Then he made his forecast. Severe storms likely between 7 and 9 p.m. Heavy rain, possible hail, winds up to 40 miles per hour. Recommend staying indoors during that window. He wasn't certain. He gave it an 80% probability. He could have been wrong, but he wasn't. The storms came exactly as predicted, and the city was prepared. One of his colleagues called afterward. That was impressive, Robert. How did you nail it so precisely? Robert smiled. The same way you would have. I paid attention. I did the work, I made my best guess. No special insight. The insight is that there's no shortcut. There's just the sky, the data, and the willingness to be wrong sometimes while trying to be right. He hung up and looked at tomorrow's forecast, already taking shape in his mind. Partly cloudy, chance of showers in the afternoon, temperatures in the low 60s, probably, maybe. His best estimate based on everything he knew and everything he was still learning. It wasn't certainty, but it was honest. And for the first time in 37 years, that felt like enough. Robert Chen continued forecasting the weather for another 15 years. He was wrong sometimes more often than in his miraculous period, less often than most meteorologists. He never regained his perfect accuracy, and he never entirely stopped wondering about the gift he'd lost. But on quiet evenings, standing on his balcony and watching the clouds, he would remember the old woman's words. Being wrong is part of being human, and he would smile, grateful for the uncertainty, grateful for the work, grateful for the work, grateful for the chance to keep learning until the very last forecast. The sky held its secrets, as it always had, but now Robert approached those secrets with humility instead of certainty, with curiosity instead of confidence. And in that approach, he found something more valuable than being always right. He found a way to be beautifully, imperfectly human. The end.